is made up from, okay. The Way Coalition is made up from volunteers from the village of Hastings-on-Hudson, working together to reduce the use of harmful substances to youth. We began in 2015 and we're now in our 8th year of drug-free community grant funding. And we include representatives from many segments of the community, including parents, youth, educators, police, healthcare providers, faith communities, business, and civic leaders. Working together, we gather data to determine the greatest areas of need, educate both youth and parents, and respond to the harm these substances pose to our youth and to the community. Also, tonight, I want to introduce you to Nancy Pasquale, who will be joining us. She is a coalition coordinator like myself in RYE with RYE Act. And because Dr. K will not be using PowerPoint, and we're just going to be on here so he has some faces to look at while he speaks. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker this evening, Dr. Alok Kanojia, also known as Dr. K, is the world's foremost authority on mental health for the gaming community. He's a graduate of Tufts University School of Medicine and did his psychiatric residency at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston and McLean Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's a former Harvard Medical School instructor specializing in mental health for the gaming community, and is the president and co-founder of Healthy Gamer, which is a mental health platform and that provides content, coaching, and community resources to help young people take control of their mental health and their lives. I was introduced to him when I found a video on YouTube of a presentation he gave to Bronxville Middle School called "Your Child's Brain is No Match for Modern Gaming." I loved his story of how he came to this work, his practical advice, and way of communicating. I'm very happy to have him with No to Prevent tonight. So Dr. Alok, please take it away, Dr. K.
Thank you so much, Linda, for having me here. Thank you, guys. I see that there's a gigantic turnout. There's over 100 people here, which is insane. And I really hope that by the end of this hour and a half, each and every one of you will be better equipped to understand your child's relationship with video games and technology, understand why they're so plugged into it, as well as having some fundamental principles or approaches to helping your child develop a healthy relationship with technology. And finally, some really, really practical stuff that y'all can do, things that are sometimes a little bit counterintuitive to help your child stay away from screens. So just a little bit about myself. I was talking to Linda, and she said that she appreciated this segment of the talk at the Bronx Middle School. So, hi, everybody. My name is Alok, but people call me Dr. K. That is something that the internet started calling me about 6 years ago, so that's what I'm known by now. But my journey to get here has been somewhat meandering. So I grew up, I'm the immigrant, I'm the son of Indian immigrants. Both of my parents were doctors, and I basically played a lot of video games growing up. And when I was in high school and college is really when I started to manifest a video game addiction. So in my freshman year of college, I failed most of my classes. I was gaming about 16 to 20 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So I would wake up, game all day, skip all my classes. I skipped final exams, which is insane when I think about it. So I really struggled a lot with gaming. So I managed barely to not kind of fail out. I was put on academic probation. And then after 2 years of basically getting around a 2.0 GPA average, something wasn't working. So I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't control my behavior. This was back in 2003, right? So before even video games were as ubiquitous and addictive as they are now. And so my dad suggested that I go to India. And so this was one of the few times that I actually listened to him. So I went to India. I stayed at an ashram, which is sort of like a monastery that's kind of out in the wilderness. I was there for about 3 months, got my first introduction to yoga and meditation, was meditating and doing yoga basically all day for about 3 months, and then decided I wanted to become a monk. So what I really loved about this was what really frustrated me was like, I didn't understand why I could not get my body and my brain to do what I wanted it to do. Like when I would wake up in the morning, I was like, I would set an alarm for 7 a.m. for an 8 a.m. Spanish class. And like, I was like, okay, today I have to go to class. I have to go to class. If I don't go to class today, I'm gonna, I'm gonna lose a whole letter grade. So I'd missed so many classes that at some point they just start knocking you down from like an A to a B. So even though everything was so important, I saw myself ruining my life like day by day. And I wasn't even having fun, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't control myself. So what I really loved about India was I learned a way to control myself. I learned through the practice of, through contemplative practice and things like meditation, where desires come from, how you start controlling them, how to focus my mind. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I decided to become a monk. My teachers did not take me as a monk. They said, you need to go finish your school, go get a doctoral degree. And then if you still want to take your vows at the age of 30, we'll take you. So I went back to the US and then was planning on becoming a monk, was focused on that for about 7 years. But that didn't ultimately work out because I met my wife and then decided that the whole celibacy with thing was not going to work out for me. So um, then I was sort of stuck with kind of a weird situation because I graduated in about it took me 5.5 years to finish my undergrad, finished with about a 2.4 GPA. And then I was dating this girl and I like basically had no prospects. So I decided I wanted to go to medical school. 50% of it was because she wanted to be married to a doctor. She was a big fan of Grey's Anatomy. I don't know if you guys have seen the show, but so then it took me about 3 years to get into medical school because getting in with a 2.5 is not easy. I applied for 120 times and basically got rejected. But then when I got into medical school, got interested in psychiatry, really just the mind is my favorite organ. So I love understanding how the mind works. And then ended up doing my residency training at Harvard and Mass General Hospital and McLean, which are just two of the most amazing institutions on the planet. And while I was there, I back in 2015, I asked some of my mentors, like, what do y'all think about gaming addiction? And I don't know if y'all remember. I mean, I know 2015 feels like a long time ago, but we still have a pretty bad opioid crisis. But 2015 was really when it was kind of like at its height. There were just a lot of prescription pain pills being flooded all over the place. So my mentors and even people at the American Psychiatric Association were like, this is what we're focused on. So like, yeah, we sort of hear that technology is addicting and like we kind of know it's addicting, but it's like not that big of a deal right now. And I thought that that was like a huge mistake. I was seeing immense amounts of addiction. And the problem is that back then, like 10 years ago, games were not as mainstream as they are now. And so addiction was like in a large part of the population, but that part of the population was never seeing psychiatrists. So we had these cases of, kid living in parents' basement at the age of 28, maybe went to college, maybe finished college, had trouble getting a job because of the economy, and they were just kind of sitting at home all the time and playing video games and trying to get a job, and then like parents just didn't know what to do. So I was seeing a ton of addiction. And then basically when I finished my training and stuff, I was focused on evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine and sort of using like East meets West, like let's use neuroscience and then let's use like meditation and yoga and let's help people become mentally healthy. So I was doing a lot of work with startups out of places like the MIT incubator and things like that, and working with like high performers. But the problem was like these were not my people. And I felt like there was a huge group of growing people who were predominantly young men back then, who were like being left behind by society. So this is back in 2018. So I decided to start Healthy Gamer, and basically that started out. I logged onto Twitch. If you guys know what Twitch is, it's a live streaming platform that predominantly streams gaming. So I'm still a gamer. So I started streaming on Twitch and streaming like mental health content and lectures. So I started talking to gamers on the internet. And so that around 2018, I started that around 2018, 2019. And then the pandemic hit, and then we were the fastest growing stream on Twitch. started getting tons and tons of internet focus and things like that. And we helped a lot of people. So Healthy Gamer is really about helping people with addictions. And we're here today. So I know this sounds kind of weird to say because I'm here as an expert, but I'm not actually like an expert in parenting. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. We play video games together, and we also struggle with technology use in the household. So like y'all are arguably better parents than I am, or we're all in the same ballpark there. But what I'm an expert in is your kids, right? So I'm not an expert in parenting, but I'm an expert in your kids. And I'm an expert in helping people with technology problems and addictions in general. So I just love addiction psychiatry in general. Develop healthy relationships. So what I'm going to share with y'all today is what I've learned about your kids to equip you with the information that then you can use to intervene with your children. And the reason I sort of do it this way is I'm sort of focused on equipping y'all because actually y'all know your kids better than I do, right? I actually don't know your kids, maybe. I mean, very small chance. And so that's really what I'd like to do. I'm also a clinician. I'm not a researcher. So I love working with people and sort of trying to figure out what works. And the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with y'all today, we developed into an evidence-based parent program. So now hundreds of people have gone through it. We've collected outcomes, so we know that it's effective at a large scale. So I'm really confident in what I'm going to share with y'all today. So let's get into it. So first thing is I want y'all to understand what technology is doing to your kids. I think this is a bit theoretical. We'll get to like practical stuff later, but I love this stuff and I think it's important for y'all to understand. So a lot of people think that addiction is about dopamine, right? So we all hear about dopamine and like, oh my God, dopamine, 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 dopamine. But that's not really why people get addicted. So if you look at like fundamentally, why do people get addicted to stuff? Every addictive substance or behavior on the planet has two fundamental features. One is that it gives us pleasure, and the second is that it takes away pain. So anytime we have a coping mechanism, we can look at something like alcohol, right? So like you can have a drink and it's fun to drink sometimes. And then the other thing that we can do is use alcohol to cope with our emotions. So once we understand that anything addictive will do these two things for us. And the reason it becomes addictive is when we become dependent on it, right? So alcohol, 6% of people in the United States have an addiction to alcohol. Somewhere between 9 and 20% of people are addicted to video games, which I know is insane. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy number. The highest estimate of video game addiction actually comes out of a study from Iran from about 7 or 8 years ago. 22% of people were addicted there. And we know that the rates of addiction in the US are probably around 10, 12, 13%. The other thing that's really scary about this is if you look at that's out of the population, right? So that includes people my age and your age. That also includes people older than us, grandma, grandpa. But there's a decent chance that we're not the ones who are addicted. So probably if you look in a school age population, the rates of addiction are even higher. So it's a huge problem. The other thing is that, a lot of parents feel absolutely overwhelmed dealing with this. And there's a very, very good reason for that. I want y'all to just appreciate what y'all are up against. Okay? So we have companies on the planet right now who are developing technology. And the way that they make money is by getting attention from you or your kids, right? So if your kid plays Fortnite will make money. And if your kid plays Minecraft will make money. If they play Roblox will make money. So everyone is competing for your child's attention. And in that competition, they have, psychologists trained at Harvard and neuroscientists trained at Stanford. These are multi-billion-dollar companies. We're talking about people like Google and Meta and TikTok, as well as gigantic game studios like Tencent and Epic Games and Valve and people like that. So these are, multi-billion-dollar companies that are paying all kinds of experts, behavioral economists, psychologists, product developers to develop things that get your kid glued to the screen. So we're just outgunned. Like as parents, like our degree of training is like very little, and they have just this gigantic amount of resources. Despite the fact that we're outgunned, and this is why everyone is dealing with this problem now, which I think is evidenced by, the attendance today. Even though that may seem hopeless, in my experience, we generally see great success with most people. And there's one really simple reason for that. That's because we've been fighting in the dark. We've been fighting with a blindfold on. They know how these technologies affect your child's brain. You do not. So it's not a fair fight. So my goal today is to even that playing field and help y'all understand fundamentally, how does your child get addicted to this screen? And if you can understand that, then you can engineer things. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do that will help your child develop a healthy relationship with technology. So the first thing that we have to do, and this is why we see, I think, pretty good success, is there's a basic problem right now in most households, which is that it's you against your kid. Okay, so your kid wants to play the video game, they want to spend time on their cell phone, and you have become the bad guy. Y'all are no longer on the same team. So this is a huge problem because in my experience as someone who works in addiction psychiatry, it is impossible, and I've seen people try really, really, really hard to be sober for someone else. You just can't do it. So what I see a lot of parents doing is they are fundamentally trying to create a structure to force their child away from the game. But the child wants to be in the game. That's what they want to do. And as long as they want to do that, you are fighting a huge uphill battle. And the most fundamental ally that you have in helping develop healthy relationships with screens is actually working against you. So the crux of our intervention is to get the two of y'all on the same team. I've seen people going through divorce who are, trying to get their spouse to be sober. I've seen people, partners at law firms and things like that who, like, the law firm wants them to get sober, but if they don't want to get sober, like, it's just not going to happen. So we're going to try to help you get on the same team with your kid. And the first place that starts is by understanding what the technology does to their brain, okay? So if we think about what games are, the reason we like playing games is because we have this thing called a brain. And the brain gets stimulated by certain things. The brain wants certain things. So, for example, we all have this evolutionary drive to not be ostracized. Because as human beings, if you get kicked out of your tribe, it's basically a death sentence. So we all have this drive to connect with other people. We all have a drive to progress and try to move forward in life. And so what happens with games is that they've basically figured out how to activate these fundamental survival drives in an artificial way. And we'll go through each of those in detail. And then we run into a basic problem. So if my brain wants certain things, like I want to feel good about myself, right? Like I want to accomplish something in life. I want to like be someone. And if I want those things and then a game comes along and turns on those switches in my brain, then I'm going to gravitate towards that thing. And this creates a couple of huge problems. The first problem that it makes is that once my drive to progress gets satisfied in the game, that drive is no longer there to act in real life. So what we tend to see is when people invest in games, they stop investing in the real world. That's something fundamental that needs to change. The second problem that we tend to run into is the game is designed to be easier, safer than real life, right? So if I think about accomplishment, which is one of the 5 fundamental psychological drives that we see in people with video game addiction, we all want to accomplish something, right? That drive, the problem with that drive is that if I try to accomplish something in the real world, like let's say I want to be a published author, okay? That is not something I can put like thousands of hours into that, and there's no guarantee of success. So video games are subtle because they give this sense of difficulty, and we'll get to that in a second. But I'm designed to win in the game. Life is not designed for me to win. So now we have this basic problem where we have all of these fundamental needs which get met in the video game, and the video game gives it to us easier than real life does. The video game gives it to us with more certainty than the real world does. So the crux of our approach is going to be to help your children get their psychological needs met in the real world. So once they are getting what they need from the real world, the drive to play video games will naturally go down. And right, so I started this company called Healthy Gamer because it's not about abstinence. I play video games, my kids play video games, we all play video games together, but they serve the role in our life that I think they should, which is as a source of recreation. It becomes an addiction when we use the video game. Or so what's an unhealthy gamer? This is a really common question we get. It's when you use the game to meet your fundamental psychological needs instead of just having a good time, right? That's what an unhealthy gamer is. And what we want to help you all do is have your kids have a fulfilling life in the real world and play games on the side. Okay? So let's go over the 5 fundamental needs. And the reason this is important is because once you understand what your child is getting from the game, then we know what we need to create as an alternative in the real world. So this is where, parents will try to pull their kids out of the game, but they don't realize that it's sort of like, if your child is getting food from an unhealthy behavior like stealing, and we just like stop them from stealing, but we never give them any food, then the stealing, they're going to find some way to keep doing the behavior. Okay? So the first thing we already talked about is accomplishment and a sense of progress. So this is also something that's really interesting. Generally speaking, we feel more accomplished when things are difficult, right? So Linda was kind enough to mention that I was instructor at Harvard Medical School and I trained there and all that good stuff, right? So like that's like impressive, like oh my God, like oh, right? And why is that impressive? It's because we have this perception that that's difficult, and we as human beings value things that are difficult. There's this part of our brain that the harder something is, when we achieve it, the rush of dopamine we get is way higher, right? So if you emptying the dishwasher is like not that big of a deal. Winning the Super Bowl gives you a huge rush, right? And this is what video games do. I don't know if you guys have kind of noticed this, but if a video game is too easy, we call it boring and people stop playing. If it's too hard, they quit, right? Because the game it's way too difficult. So like, I'm not going to waste my time. So video games have found a really, really beautiful way of titrating to that difficulty curve where there's like difficulty with reward, difficulty with reward, difficulty with reward. And the game always gets harder, harder, harder. If you look at Fortnite is a great example of this. So, the classic Fortnite mode is 100 people in an arena where there's only one winner. The problem is that when you win, and I think most people win on average like 3% of the games they play or something like that. I guess it should be 1%, but I don't know. Something like 2 to 3% of matches, people will end up winning. And the reason for that, and think about the rush, right? So when I'm like up against 100 people, when your kid becomes a valedictorian and is at the top of their class, like that's a big reward. So what video games have done, and there's a reason why Fortnite is very addictive, because they sort of figured this formula out. So this is the first fundamental psychological need. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to talk to our kids about why they play video games, which we'll get to in a minute, but let me go through the others. So the second thing that we get from video games is a sense of control. So if you sort of think about, your child, there's a very good chance that they perceive that they don't have as much control in life as they want, right? Like, oh my God, like bedtime, like, can we stay up 30 minutes? Can we stay up 30 minutes? But then suddenly you create a game like Minecraft and they're in complete control. Like they get to design whatever they want to. They can spend hours on it. They can abandon it. No one's telling them, hey, now that you started this project, you have to finish it. They are in complete control within the game. And that's what the game tries to do. Games that are overly restrictive with the amount of control they give you, people don't play. And people really love, like if you look at Roblox and Minecraft, I think these are the two biggest examples of, cases where a child really gets to feel in control. And now you've got an option, right? We're going to Stop playing the video game, go to school, listen to what everybody else is telling you. Now, when you come home, I'm going to tell you to do this, and I'm going to tell you to do this, I'm going to tell you to do this. Or there's this virtual world where you get to do whatever you want to. You are king, you're queen, you're God, like you can do whatever you want. So that sense of control, and what we tend to find, this is not just true of games, but basically a lot of addictions, things like eating disorders, the more that someone feels out of control in their life, the more they will oftentimes engage in behaviors where they feel in control to try to compensate. So there's a sense of accomplishment or progress. There's a sense of control. Next thing that we're going to talk about is community. So this is where, if we were talking a little bit when we were just doing our tech check, and the biggest problem with games is that if you take it away from your kid, you're isolating them, right? So like 10 years ago, this wasn't the case, but now everybody plays games. One study from a couple of years ago found that 98% of people under the age of 30 play some kind of video game. I was talking to a school teacher from the second grade. This was also a few years ago, but she was telling me that 100% of the boys and about 70% of the girls in her second grade class play Fortnite. So this was like just insane, right? So now what started to happen is gaming has become a way to socialize. And like I mentioned earlier, socialization and building community is really, really important. And this is what a lot of parents find incredibly frustrating and difficult is, when you take away the game, what y'all need to understand is you're not taking away a game. That's not what it is. We should stop using that term. A game is something that you do for fun. You are taking away their community. You are taking away their friendships. You're taking away their social connections. And their brain has been structured to rebel against that, right? We don't want to be isolated. Isolation is danger. Isolation is depression. Isolation is anxiety. In some cases, isolation is suicidality. So they are fighting for these fundamental needs being met. And that's why y'all are encountering so much friction. It almost seems like disproportionate, right? So like, I don't know if you guys remember when, y'all's kids were like 3 or 4. And like when you take away their toy, right? Like, let's say they've got like a toy tiger, or they got some like, blocks or something like that. The kid throws a temper tantrum, but the kid doesn't like plot to deceive you so that they can get access to the blocks. And that's because these fundamental needs are being driven by the game. The last thing that we're going to talk about is safety. So the other thing that games provide is a sense of safety. This is somewhat related to control, but if you just look at studies and you ask people like, how do you feel in the real world? And this is what I see, especially like this happened to me when I was in high school. I got bullied a lot growing up. And I was also a year younger than most of my peers. And so like the game was the only place where I could be equal to everybody else. Because I was like, I remember when I was, 6 years old, I was competing against 8-year-olds like in flag football. And I was just absolutely getting destroyed. I didn't understand at the time. I didn't process that I was 2 years younger. And, a 6-year-old can't compete really against 8-year-olds. But what I learned very quickly is that when we're playing a video game, I'm just as good as my peers. And if you look at technology in general, now technology has been arranged in a way where we can be like very safe, right? So if I don't like the text messages you're sending me, I can block you. Really easy. I can just move on. So there's a lot of protection and safety on the internet and in games in general. So if you look at like, what it's like, maybe y'all remember, what it's like to be in high school. Your body is going through changes. You've got acne. You're maybe not super happy about your weight, right? Because when you're like 10 years old, you don't really pay attention to what you eat. And then your metabolism changes and things like that. And you kind of go through this awkward stage. And the problem is you have to go to school every day as that person. And on the internet, like you don't have to be that person. You can be whoever you want to. You're not judged based on whether your voice cracks or whether you've got acne or not, right? You get to be whoever you want. And it's no coincidence. I don't know if y'all know this, but if you look at any game basically out there, one of the key things we've seen is an increase in sort of like the character customization. So we get to be whoever we want to. That's the other kind of fifth need, is that video games tend to give us a sense of identity. Oftentimes we define ourselves, like if you ask your kid, what are you proud of? Well, I'm really proud that I built this awesome thing in Minecraft, or I'm really proud that I built this thing, or I was number one in Fortnite or whatever. So they get a lot of sense of safety, and I'm blending into identity for a second, but they get a sense of identity and they get a sense of safety from video games. So now the question becomes, what do we do with this information? So this is the key thing to understand. Our general strategy is going to be understand why they are playing the game and cultivate real life experiences that meet those psychological needs, right? As long as the game is providing them with these fundamental needs, it's going to be really hard to stop. Because I want y'all to understand that the drive to accomplish that stuff, the drive for safety, the drive to be someone, to be in control of your life, to accomplish things and progress, all of those things they're getting from the video game. And that's what we want our kids to get, right? Like, we want our kids to feel safe. We want our kids to have control. We want our kids to be confident in who they are, to progress and accomplish things. And they want those things too. The problem is that, especially with a developing brain, if I'm 16 years old, I don't know how to develop a sense of identity that I'm confident in. And the game just automatically gives it to me. So one of the things that we concretely suggest that y'all do, this is kind of crazy, is spend about a month talking to your kid and just understanding why they play games. What do you like about the game? How do you feel when you play the game? What's the rest of your life like? How's school going? What are your friends like? Do you have a crush on anyone? Like, we really just need to understand what their life is like. And we're really looking for, tunneling down. Like, you can't just go into and ask them, does the game give you a sense of identity? But y'all can kind of slow play your way to those conversations. What we tend to find works pretty well is you have one conversation a week for about a month. And from the get-go, you tell your kid at the very beginning, nothing we talk about in these conversations is going to change any boundaries or set any limits or anything like that. So what we want to do is approach them and sort of let them know, if you're concerned about their gaming, you can be transparent with them that, look, I'm concerned about your gaming, but I recognize that I'm trying to put all these limits on without understanding why you're playing in the first place. So as your parent, I'd like to understand what you like about this game, what's going on there. And then this is also where if you're a little bit concerned, you can even sort of let them know that at some point limits are coming. Do you want to be a part of that process or not? The more that I understand why you like the game, I may not need to take those things away, right? I'm really trying to understand, how can we help you build a healthy life and also have fun playing video games? And in order to do that, I need to understand. So I would start with that kind of disclaimer for these conversations and let them know, for the next month, I just want to understand why you're playing games, or not. I don't use the word why. Some of those details, I wrote a book called How to Raise a Healthy Gamer, where we teach a lot of evidence-based communication techniques. So the stuff that we're talking about in the talk today is kind of the meat of the book, but there's a lot of execution points about how to ask questions that will get your kids to open up. This is what they teach us when we're, training to become psychiatrists. So talk to your kid and try to get a sense of, do they get a sense of identity from this? Do they get a sense of progress or control? Do they get a sense of safety? Do they get a sense of community, belonging, autonomy? What are they getting out of the game? And at the same time, what we also want to do is assess those in the real world, right? So what's your friend group like in the real world? We want to understand what their situation is. And what you'll sort of figure out is that there are some things that really draw them into the game. Now, here's the really cool thing. So I know a lot of this stuff may sound like, y'all may be skeptical, but I would say that 95% or 99% of gamers I've worked with don't want to play as many games as they do. I want y'all to understand this, okay? This is huge. So you think that your kid is against you. They're not really against you. They want to play less. They know that, right? So if you've got a kid who's even 13, 14, most of them, some of them really want to have fun, but most of them realize on some level, y'all are parents at an after school thing on an evening on a Thursday. You guys could be doing something fun and you're here instead. And so the attitude that y'all have is going to get injected into your kids. Life is something that we should work on. We should improve. Y'all are super proactive about improving your life and improving your kid's life. That is baked into your kid, whether y'all like it or not. It's a wonderful thing. The problem is that the kid doesn't know how to get their needs met in the real world. They absolutely want to, right? So you can take like any 15 or 16-year-old boy who plays way too many games on the internet, and they know that they're going to have trouble flirting if all they ever do is spend time in front of a computer screen. They know that, but it's so terrifying. Like, now I've been playing games for 4 years. How am I ever supposed to learn how to flirt? Okay. And here's the crazy thing. Here's how I know that your kids are interested in changing their life, because I showed up on Twitch, a gaming platform, and I started helping people overcome their video game addiction. And we were the fastest growing stream on Twitch for a period of 3 months during the pandemic. It's insane, right? So they want this. They're just afraid that if they tell you what their concerns about gaming are, that you will use that as ammo, right? So if they give you even an opening like, oh my God, games are not good for me, that you're going to like drive in. You're going to be like, yes, they're not good for you. Very good, very good. Let's stop. Let's quit. Then why don't you quit? I'm going to help you quit. So parents tend to move into taking that responsibility, which is a big mistake. So first month, we're just going to talk to them about why they play games. Second thing that we're going to do is start to build an alliance. We want to get them on the same team, okay? So the good news is, talking to them for a month, you guys have already done like 25 to 30% of the work. So when you spend time talking to your kids without even trying to make a change, right? Remember the goal here, I know it's insane. You don't want to be sober for them. I don't want you to be sober for them. It's exhausting. If you guys are trying to make sure that your kid is going to bed on time and not doing games behind your back, the whole point is to help them be like independent kids who regulate their own technology use. I know it sounds insane, but like that's actually doable. And this is like arguably the most important skill that you can equip them with. Because technology, when they get to be 18 years old, 20 years old, when they're off to college and working and stuff like that, mom or dad ain't going to be around to keep them from playing video games. They have to develop a healthy relationship with technology. Otherwise, they will drown in a world where ChatGPT makes everything so easy. Right? So this is only going to get harder for them. And I think kids understand that on some level. So we want to talk to them for a month. Second thing that we want to do is then we want to start figuring out like limits and boundaries and stuff like that. But since you've been talking to them, you've been modeling a couple of really cool things. So when you approach your child to ask them questions and try to understand instead of try to control, hopefully, fingers crossed, this happens basically 90% of the time, they will mirror that behavior, right? So they do what you do. My favorite example of this, so I have a grandmother who's like 95. And when my daughter, she's 10 now, 8 years ago, my grandmother was like in her 80s. She was 84, I guess. So my grandmother would do like the grandmother sit down. I don't know if you guys know this, right? But like she's got like arthritis and things like that. So when she sits down, she's like, ugh. And then like I saw my 2-year-old like start to do that. Like she would like flop down and like grunt every time she got up and every time she sat down, because she's learning this from her grandmother or great grandmother. And so your kids are going to be, the modeling that you provide is going to be what they mimic. And one of the big problems that parents get into is when you try to exert control, they're going to do the same thing. They're like, you're trying to control me? No, I'm not going to let that work. So it becomes antagonistic. So you've already laid a really good foundation. If you just talk to them and you strive to understand, you've modeled, hey, I'm trying to understand your viewpoint, and then you'll be amazed. They will try to understand yours. They will be way more open-minded. There's a ton of research into how this stuff works, right? But like, if I come at you hard, you're going to be like very defensive. And if I approach you with like compassion and curiosity, like you're much more likely to open up. You're much more likely to cooperate. So then what we want to do in phase 2 is we want to pick a couple of things, okay? A couple of goals that they want to do. So this is where, you can talk to them a little bit about, okay, like here are the requirements that I have. We'll get to that a little bit more in part 3, but At the beginning, we want to start with one goal that the two of y'all can collaboratively work on. So for these five things, a sense of identity, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of progress, a sense of safety, what is it that makes you feel unsafe? What would make you feel proud of yourself in the real world? What is it that when you look in the mirror, what is it that you see that you're not proud of? I want to help you look in the mirror and feel proud of the person that you are. And when you approach a child like that, when you guys figure out this is what's going on, they will be on your team, right? Because they want that, and you are just supporting them in achieving what they want. So I would suggest that y'all pick like one or two goals. And if y'all are looking for different examples of activities, once again, a lot of these are in How to Raise a Healthy Gamer, but like, martial arts, I think is a really great example of something that does a couple of different things, right? So it gets people physically somewhat fit and active, gives people a sense of confidence, gives people a sense of progress and accomplishment. Like you learn how to do cool things like, do jump kicks and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of great stuff. We've had a lot of success with martial arts. Other times it's other kinds of like creative things, like people want to learn a skill, they want to learn to code, they want to learn to paint or whatever. Other times it's more like social things, right? So it's like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with organizations like Toastmasters, but that's like a public speaking organization. So the key thing is that there's lots of options, but what we really want to do is collaborate with them to try to figure out, okay, how are we going to help you accomplish this? Sometimes it's something like therapy where, you may not realize that your kid is struggling with depression or anxiety. So that's why they're sort of using the video game to regulate their emotions. Games are really good at that. But I think we want to have conversations and sort of pick a target and sort of move towards it. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is be very careful. Now we're going to get to like pretty concrete things about how do you set up boundaries that are effective? How do you, restrict their behavior? So this is where there are a couple of like things that we found work pretty well. The first is, we tend to have an attitude that many parents dislike, and that's because, remember, I'm a representative of your children. Technically, I'm on their team. I'm not on your team. So I love to play video games. Your kids love to play video games. But here's the thing. The video game should be after everything gets done. Okay? So the goal here is like, what is the minimum that your kid is supposed to do? And when they do those things, they get games after that. And so oftentimes this results in some like pretty wild things. So I'll give you all just one example. So most parents will ask me a question like, how many hours a day is too much? So I don't know, how rotted everyone's brains here are, but if y'all are rotted like me and, there's shows like Love is Blind and things like that we watch on Netflix, right? We have our own guilty pleasures. If you think about like, do you like watching one episode a day? Maybe y'all are healthy adults, unlike recovering addicts like I am. So you guys like watching one episode a day. But like, I think a lot of us enjoy like, being in pajamas at 4 p.m. Like we don't get to do this because we've got middle schoolers and high schoolers and we have to set good examples, but we enjoy binging, right? We enjoy that. It's like, okay, let's go to Napa Valley and like, we're going to go on a wine tour, which means like not, some that can mean different things to different people. So like sometimes what we'll do is we'll create structures where you talk to your kid about, okay, what is it about gaming that you really like? Let's try to figure out how to preserve that while also making sure that you do the things that you're supposed to do, like finish your homework, do some kind of exercise, be involved with the family on some way. And I'll give you all just an example of something that, some parents developed with their kids, and we sort of use this model and other parents have used it. So it's like Monday through Thursday. So parents will ask how many hours a day is okay. And it's like, I don't know if I really like that question. If they're doing everything right, then they can play in their free time. So what this ended up being is like, kid is like basically getting all of their stuff done Monday through Thursday. Friday rolls around at 5 p.m. Or 6 p.m. We have dinner with the family. And then they're going to order him a pizza. Pizza gets here at 10. They're going to get him a 2-liter bottle of soda. And he gets to play all night, like just play all night. You can go to sleep at dawn. We'll make you breakfast. You can go to sleep, pass out, wake up around Saturday. Like Saturday, you're kind of recovering. But like, Saturday by dinner time, you're going to be with the family. And then on Sunday, we're going to like be together on Sunday, right? So you have like a 24-hour binge. If that's what you want, you can go ahead and do it. You just have to do all of these things first. Okay. So it's really about, and I don't know if this makes sense. I want y'all to think about something that you like doing. The value of that thing is not uniform throughout your day. I'll give you guys an example of my guilty pleasure. So I like to watch esports. If you guys know what that is, it's competitive video gaming with my tea in the morning. This is like the one, like it's like my time. So on any day that I make a cup of nice masala chai and I'll sit down in front of the TV and I just want to sip it and I want to watch for like 45 minutes. The value of that to me is really high. So like if you ask me to cut out, do I want to watch esports when my kids are home and we're having dinner? Like, no, I'd rather like spend time with my kids. But that's the one time that I want to do it. So not all gaming is the same. And we also know there's tons of neuroscience studies about how there's diminishing value the more you play, right? So your kid may be willing to sacrifice a fair amount of it, but playing 1 hour a day is like terrible because 1 hour a day is like just when you get hooked. It's kind of like saying like, okay, how many French fries a day is healthy? 3 French fries. You can have 3 French fries every day. Like that's no fun. It's just torture to have 3 French fries every day, right? Like give me a side of fries once a week, but not 3 a day. So have conversations with your kid about what about gaming do you like? What about gaming do you not like? Then what we want to do is set some limits, right? We want to let them know, hey, I'm behind your gaming. It's great, but this is the stuff that you have to do, right? Like you have to wake up on time for school. You have to be prepared for your tests. You have to do some amount of chores. You have to spend some amount of time with the family. Like, here's what I want from you. Then we get to the part that the parents hate the most. So what we're going to go for, helping your child develop a healthy relationship with technology is not a 3-month process. We lay out a pretty good 3-month program, works pretty well. Honestly, it's a really good foundation, but I would say it takes about 1 to 2 years to really get your kid in a good spot, right? 18 months is what we're talking about is like independence with gaming. Okay? So in order to do that, what we want to do is accumulate wins. So one thing that we tell parents to do is something called the 25% rule. Oftentimes parents will come to me and they will say, my kid is addicted to games. They play games for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. My son is 26 years old. He lives in our basement. I don't know what to do. My husband says it's a phase. There's a chapter about if you and your partner, sometimes people don't live together because of divorce and things like that. Sometimes we see a single parent that's very, very permissive and just allows their kid to do whatever. And then the other parent is trying to control things. It's a mess. But there's techniques for that in the book too. If you guys want to know about that stuff, you can ask a question. We'll get to it in Q&A. But the key thing here is, where was I? 25% rule. So if your kid is playing for 14 hours a day, I understand that you're desperate and I understand that you need to change. But if we sort of think about behavioral change, it's really hard to go from 14 hours a day to being productive, having a job 8 hours a day, going to the gym, doing laundry, doing everything else. So what we tell parents to do is take where you are and take where you want to go. Cut it in half and cut it in half again. That should be your first target. Feels really, really, really bad, but this is what I'm going to tell you all as parents, right? Because this is not on YouTube, so your kids aren't going to be able to find it. So we want to institute boundaries, kind of like tightening a belt or tightening a noose. Sounds pretty grim, so I won't use that. But we want to start with wins, right? So what I tell parents is, and I'll explain some interesting psychology here. Start with the smallest hill that you are willing to die on. So what we want to teach them, because oftentimes we as parents, we don't realize this, we have trained our children to ignore our words. So I'll give you an example of what this looks like. But hopefully this isn't happening in your household. Okay, so dinner is at 7:30, so make sure you come by 7:30. The kid is like, okay, fine. So 6:30 rolls around. Hey, just a reminder, you're supposed to be doing your homework. Dinner's at 7:30. Kid's like, okay, fine. 7 o'clock rolls around. Hey, dinner's in 30 minutes. Make sure you come down. Or are you doing homework? Kid is like, yeah, whatever. 7:30 rolls around, dinner time, they don't show up. 7:45 rolls around. Or so not 7:45, what am I saying? 7:32 rolls around and you're like, dinner time. Dinner was 2 minutes ago. 7:35 rolls around. It's dinner time. 7:40, 7:45. 7:40 is like, oh, you better come down right now. 7:45, you go up, you're pissed off. You're like, you better get down to dinner, otherwise you unplug the Ethernet, or you unplug their power cord, or you turn off their thing, or you turn off the TV, or whatever, you create a fight. And this is what happens is parents are like, oh my God, this happens every day. Every day is a struggle. Why is every day a struggle? It's a struggle because you're training them to ignore your words. How many words have you used? You've told them 15 times. And what is the impact when you tell them 15 times? There's only one consequence the 15th time. You are literally training them to ignore your words. And then what happens, you guys may have noticed, this is why parents are absolutely insane, okay? They get driven insane by their own children. Because what your kid then learns is, okay, when mom and dad snaps, then I get in trouble. And then they say no gaming for a week. So now what I need to do is I need to listen to them just when they're about to snap. And then I want y'all to think about when your kid realizes, okay, now mom's really pissed off or dad is really pissed off and they're about to snap, I'm going to listen to them now. Then I want y'all to think about what is the signal that your child responds to. You're about to blow. The volcano is about to erupt. And so then I want you to think about what is the psychological situation that you are creating within your household. Your kid is titrating to your explosions. So they're going to ignore you until you're about to explode. And then they're going to listen. This is something that I have seen so many times, right? So this is where we don't realize, and it's not our fault, by the way. The reason that this is so hard for us is not only because we have billion-dollar companies that are like, hiring people like me to make games more addictive. But the other thing is that we learn parenting from our parents. And our parents didn't have things that are more addictive than arguably heroin in the household at the age of 2, right? This stuff is like, it's so addictive. It's all over the place. So there's a set of skills that we as parents need to evolve with the times. And it's not your fault that you don't know this. I mean, I want y'all to really understand this. I'm 43 years old. I spent 22 years of my life spending 7 years wandering around in the Himalayas and all over India and South Korea and Japan, and a decade or 12 years doing research, going to medical school, and at places like Harvard. And like, this is what gives me 22 years of dedicated effort. And I understand this stuff. Do y'all have 22 years to go wandering around India and the Himalayas and training with like neuroscientists at like top tier institutions? I don't think so. And this is why there's so many people here today, because this is a new skill set that none of us have. So it's okay. The good news is that your kid and you are on the same team and we know how to combat it, okay? So first thing is small boundaries that you're sure that you can win, okay? The key thing here is that we want to teach the child the opposite of what we're teaching them now, which is when I say something, it's going to happen, okay? So it can be something as simple as, really small things. Your clothes go in the hamper. And then you want to be like, I know your kids are going to hate me, but you can be a little bit of an ass about it. Like you walk into their room, their clothes aren't in the hamper, you just unplug the internet. No warning. No, hey, you need to put your clothes in the hamper. This is another thing. Y'all need to start letting your kids have consequences and potentially fail. So this is another huge thing where a lot of parents, like, we don't want our kids to like fail tests and exams and things like that, right? So we're like, hey, you need to do your homework. 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 The kid is like, yeah. But they are relying on you. You're the responsible person who makes sure the homework gets done. You are training your child to become dependent on you while they get to do whatever they want. So that kind of stuff needs to change, right? So you want to pick something and then like, it's okay for you to be irrational, because then your kid is going to be like, what the hell? And then it becomes easier for them to just put the clothes in the hamper than it does like arguing with you. Right? And then if they get mad at you, they're like, Mom, I was in the game. I said, hey, look, clothes in the hamper. I asked for one thing. That's it. Right? And then once we do clothes in the hamper, we're going to escalate. We're going to tighten that belt one notch at a time. Okay? So 25% rule, pick something small that y'all can win, because the whole point is that we don't want there to be a failure here. We want you and your child to, at the end of the week, celebrate. We're like, hey, I said clothes in the hamper. I unplugged your internet last week. This week, I haven't had to do it. You've done clothes in the hamper. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. And then you can say, what's next? And they're going to be like, but I thought that was it. And you were like, no, right? This is not sufficient to be a 16-year-old. There are going to be like more things, but you're getting to play. I'm not taking away your game. I didn't unplug the internet. So like you're getting what you want. We're going to continue helping you build a life that like turns you into a functioning adult. Like that's the plan, right? We're going to do it one step at a time. And I'm going to reward you along the way. Like as you do more things, like you get more stuff. Okay. So that's the 25% rule. Another thing that we want to do, really, really careful. So I would not set boundaries when y'all are angry. So this is another really important thing that I think a lot of parents end up training their kids in the wrong way. So when you say no games for a month because you're pissed because they didn't, do their paper or whatever, take your pick. Now you have to be really careful, because if you set a limit on them that you can't enforce, what you're also teaching them is that your limits don't have to be followed, right? Because there's no consequences. This is something my parents were quite bad at. Like, not, they're wonderful parents, but they just, they grew up in India and they didn't know this stuff. So like, my parents would set all these kinds of limits on me, but then I became more and more deceptive because like, as long as they don't catch me, it's totally fine. So I would do a lot of things behind their back and stuff like that. My dad would come home late from work and things like that. So he would tell me no video games this week, but then he would come home at 10:30. So he wouldn't be around to see what was going on. And he wouldn't even communicate with my mom. It was like, really, it's just strange, but they grew up in a different world. So what I want y'all to do is be very careful, because if you set an extreme limit, and you can't enforce it, you are going to be training them to ignore your words. Like, oh, when mom or dad says no games, I don't have to listen to that. That is the one thing that we need to change, right? So it's not that you guys need to set all these big limits. It's that when mom or dad says something, like that word is law. That's what we're shooting for, that they kind of understand and respect that. And that's where we get into the biggest trouble, because we're the ones who compromise our own limits the most. We set limits when we're angry that are way too extreme, and then they're hard to reinforce. And then we make another big mistake. This is really, really terrible. Unfortunately, most parents that I run across make this mistake, and that's loving your kids. Like most of us love our children. And then we do this other really dumb thing, which is like when we say no video games for a month and they do a really good job for 2 weeks, and oh my God, they're so sweet and they're doing such a good job. And Alan's birthday is on Thursday and they're going to all have a sleepover on Friday and they're going to play Fortnite and he's been doing such a good job. Okay, fine. You can go, you can play. So you have to be really careful about that, right? So once a limit is set, you should stick to that limit. And we make two big mistakes. Either we set unrealistic limits or we compromise them. And then the kid is left like, okay, how can I get mom or dad to cave? Now they know you're going to cave. It's just, what are the circumstances that get you to cave? So that's why we also don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we've made a demand that is not, that we can't stick to. So generally speaking, what we want to do is smaller goals that your child actually has a say in, right? So this is where it's like, they don't have a vote, but they're on the advisory council, right? They're like advisors. So it's not a democracy. It's an authoritarian dictatorship, or maybe like two people at the top with like mom and dad or whatever, two parents, but like they absolutely get input, and we want to honor that input. We want to talk to them about, okay, where do you want to start? And then with a couple of these things, I think these are two of the biggest tips. And then if you guys want whole plans and stuff, that's all in the book about week by week, what you do and things like that. So just to kind of wrap up, I know it's crazy. Games are so addictive. Cell phones are everywhere. Technology is everywhere. We feel outgunned. That's because y'all are outgunned. Things are incredibly addictive. Your child is transforming because the game is changing them. Everyone is playing it. Oh, there's one last tip. I forgot. So the other thing is, I strongly recommend that y'all communicate with your child's friends' parents. So this is another thing that we get outgunned. The pack of your child and their friends all conspire. They're like, oh, but like so and so's mom lets them do it, and so and so's like, like, and so they like work together. And there's a really great study. I promise I'll wrap up in a second, but this is just a really cool study. So there's a study that looked at marijuana use in high school. And basically, what the study found is that if there is a single parent who is like lax within a group of friends, marijuana use will be high in everyone. You have to have 100% of the parents that are like willing to hold the line, because then what happens, I don't know if y'all, did this in high school or whatever, but like you go to the one person whose parents are like clueless, or not clueless, but maybe they're busy or whatever. You go to the one parent, one place. Like I remember when I was growing up, there was one parent who didn't care about nudity, like their kid watching nudity. So they had like HBO or whatever, and so like we would go to their house. And anyway, so it just takes one parent who will allow children to congregate there and engage in a bad behavior. So that's where I strongly encourage that y'all connect with other parents. People will start WhatsApp groups or Signal chats or like text threads or whatever, and then sort of try to figure out, okay, like what are y'all doing to limit gaming? We tend to find that this is a really good step as well. So at the end of the day, y'all are outgunned, but that's okay. We just haven't been fighting fire with fire. You don't need a whole lot of fire. You don't need $1 billion of research. I've tried to disseminate it all for you. And main thing is get your kid on your team, because once your kid is on your team, once y'all start racking up W's, right? Once they start feeling a little bit better about themselves and things like that, then things will start to move in the right direction. And then you're going to be encouraging them, like you're going to be supporting them if they want to play games, like they want to hang out with their friends. Like we want to like just transform the relationship to being like positive, fun, and moving in the right direction. And that can absolutely be done. So thank you for your time and attention today. I'm going to stick around for about half an hour for questions, so we'll turn it to that. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. K. I really appreciate all of your comments. And if we did tell you earlier, please enter your questions in the Q&A. I know some of them have come in, and I think that Dr. K has answered a lot of questions as he went through his talk, but we did have many questions come in before as you registered. People were asking questions. So we're going to start off, as you guys are putting your questions in the chat that you want to address tonight. I'm going to start off with some of those that came in early that did not maybe get addressed here. So I'll start out, Dr. K, with, there were a couple questions that came in advance about teenagers or kids that are on ADD medications or antidepressants, and if that impacts the dopamine effect of gaming, if they're any more or less vulnerable to addiction.
Yeah. So the answer is basically yes, but it's complicated in terms of how. So let's talk about how ADHD and depression intersect with gaming, because they intersect slightly differently. So video game addiction and ADHD are very, very high comorbidity, which means if you have one, your likelihood of developing the other is very high. And the reason for that is like, I want y'all to think about ADHD for a moment and really what it is. So if you have ADHD and you're navigating the world, it's like kind of a rough place. There's a really scary study that shows that if you look at the causative link between people who have ADHD and depression, 3% of people who get diagnosed with depression will grow up to have ADHD. 70% of people with ADHD will grow up to have depression. Okay. So this is a population of people who have both. So not everyone with ADHD grows up to have depression, but a lot of people with ADHD do grow up to have depression. Okay. And the reason for that is like, if you have ADHD and you go to school, or even when you're at home, like it's hard to succeed, right? So your teachers will be like, oh, you're not paying attention. Parents will get upset with you because you've told them 15 times to put your jacket away in the closet when you come home. And when your kid with ADHD comes home, I have a kid with ADHD, there's just a string of stuff along the floor between the doorway and wherever they end up, right? And you have to like track them down and like make sure they do all this stuff. And the problem is with ADHD is that kids know, like their life is rough. So, and this is the other thing. If you look at this is where the Eastern training comes in. If you look at contentment in the mind, when is the mind content? When do we feel good? Fundamentally, this is not neuroscience. It's when our mind is at rest. And rest means focus. It's sitting on one thing. So, what makes a great show? What makes a great book? It's a book that holds our attention. When a book is boring, that means our mind is wandering all over the place. So, people with ADHD, right, we like getting absorbed in something, watching a sunset, going for a swim, reading a good book. We all love this. So the thing about video games is the way that the sensory stimulus of video games is, it makes it very easy for people with ADHD to focus on the game. Because the game does the focusing for you. So I probably have something like ADHD, very easy to get addicted to games because games allow you to focus your mind very easily. So there's a really strong comorbidity. And then for all the other reasons that we mentioned, because kids with ADHD have trouble in the real world, right? Because not everything is designed for them. So then they have this alternative that is very easy to focus on, very easy to get caught up in, very easy to excel at. I've worked with probably like 40 to 60 esports athletes. So these are people, professional gamers that make millions of dollars a year. You know, I'd say 40% of them have ADHD. I mean, the number is just astronomical. So also, if you look at like Twitch streaming and live streaming, very high level of ADHD. And I think it's actually a competitive advantage in some fields. So this is where there's absolutely a comorbidity. I think so then you've got kind of like two things you have to do. You need to treat the ADHD, and I would recommend that you go beyond medication. So you have to sort of handle the ADHD so that that's going to be an obstacle to getting their needs met in the real world. So if you just try to go straight to getting needs met in the real world and helping them build confidence, the ADHD can interfere with that. So that's why you kind of have to kind of do the ADHD and work on it. And it takes some back and forth, but it's very doable. Now, the reason that depression and gaming is synergistic is kind of different. So when we feel bad, so depression is characterized also by something called anhedonia, which is the inability to experience pleasure. So when we are depressed, we have a lot of negative emotions. A lot of times people focus on the sadness and you know, crying and feeling bad, things like that. Oftentimes in children and teenagers, depression can also manifest as frustration and anger, by the way. So if your kid is like really, really like moody and angry and is snappish, that's one of the ways that depression can manifest. It's not always sadness and crying. So then we've got a couple of problems. So we're anhedonic, which means food doesn't taste as good. We don't feel as excited about stuff. You know, it's hard to find motivation. So games are really good because they give us that high dopamine spike. So they can sort of almost counter the anhedonia. But oftentimes when people are depressed, games are less fun too. So it's like, it's the easiest available dopamine when my brain is not feeling very dopaminergic. The second thing, and this, you know, we haven't talked so much about things like pornography, but pornography use is also astronomic rise. And so all these technologies, social media usage, pornography, video games, they're all very good at emotional regulation. So even y'all, I don't know if y'all use like things like Instagram Reels or TikTok or whatever, you know, you can be having a bad day and you can like flip open some short form content and then you will be lost in the content pretty quickly. It'll stop those feelings of negativity. So we see this vicious cycle. This is probably something akin to what happened to me where a ton of negative emotion, it's overwhelming. So I'm going to go into the game for 16 hours. And then when I come out, the negative emotion is there again. So I have to go into the game. That's probably something like what happened my freshman year. So the two are absolutely synergistic. And that's where, once again, I'm a big believer in something called dual diagnosis treatment. So when I was doing more addiction stuff at McLean and things like that, you know, one of the things that we learned is you can't treat an addiction independent of another diagnosis. They both have to be treated simultaneously. So you kind of need to work on the depression and the healthy gaming habits kind of concurrently. Great question.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think you might have just alluded to this a little bit, but early on in your talk, we got a question that came in when you were talking about the 5 fundamental needs and the, that are satisfied through video games. Someone had asked, do those principles apply also to social media and cell phone use and TikToks and video shorts
Yeah,
and other?
it's such a great question, and the answer is sort of, right. So I mean, so the more advanced you get into something, like the more complex the answer becomes. So I think if we look at technology, kind of like I said, all addictions give us pleasure and take away pain. So there are some areas where all of these technologies overlap. And then there are some areas where the effect of TikTok on your brain is different from the effect of video games.
Hmm.
There's some parts of the brain that get activated the same amount. So like your amygdala and your limbic system may be a good example. This is like your emotional center of the brain are relatively similarly activated. But for example, people who spend a lot more time on social media have a far higher risk of body dysmorphia, whereas we don't see that in video gaming, right? So social media will have, if you look at social media, it's full of pretty people. And the more, when you're just scrolling and seeing pretty people for 6 hours a day, and then you look at this, pardon my language, I'm resonating with a lot of the patients that I've sat with. When you look at this ugly fucker in the mirror, it hurts, right? So this is what's really scary. We're starting to see, there used to be gender differences in mental illness diagnoses. So women were much more likely to have eating disorders and have body dysmorphia. Men were much more likely to be addicted to things. So it used to be like a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio, basically in both of those. We're seeing an evening out of both of those things. So a lot of young men are developing eating disorders and body dysmorphia. I don't know if you guys have heard of like looks maxing, right? And everyone's getting like, anyway, so there's a lot of popular influencers who will like, I don't know if you guys have seen steroid use is like super on the rise,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you have all these like fitness influencers who are super pumped and things like that. There's an element of body dysmorphia kind of in there. So there are some things that are different and some things that are the same. I still think, in How to Raise a Healthy Gamer, the stuff in there will apply to conversations around social media, TikTok use, and things like that, right? Because it's a lot of communication skills. It's a lot of helping your child develop a healthy relationship with technology. Some of the needs may be a little bit different, but generally speaking, it works pretty well.
Okay, thank you. Um, and I know you talked about unmet emotional needs driving excessive gaming. And just from your experience in talking with so many kids and families who are struggling with this, one of the questions was if you could just share some of those. What unmet emotional needs most often drive excessive gaming in teens, and how can families address those proactively?
Yeah, so I'd say if y'all want like one thing to kind of open the conversation with, I would talk to your kid about what it's like to be a kid in today's world, right? Like when you look at the world, like what kind of place is it? And you know, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but like I feel like the world is like way more chaotic. There's just so much uncertainty. Back when I was growing up, there was a way to live life and like do pretty well. But we're living in a world where there's not a clear formula for success anymore. There's not like when I was growing up, it was like go to college, get a job, get married, have kids, and you'll basically be okay. Like don't use drugs. And like if you don't like basically like most people did okay. But the world that our kids are growing up in, you know, the in 1975, the average age that men got married was 23. The average age that women got married was 21. The average age of marriage is now like 30.8 for men, is like 28.4 for women. And that's the median age, right? Which means a lot of people are getting married later. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's like we have like a group of people who are in their late 20s and they're not sure if something is wrong with them. Did they miss the boat? There's a lot of economic uncertainty. There's some very big looming threats like AI. Like, is AI going to put everybody out of business? So it's just hard to be a kid. It's hard to because everywhere you look around, or not everywhere you look around, so the average amount of cell phone use is like 4 to 6 hours per day in the United States. So when you spend 4 to 6 hours on social media and seeing all of these people who are really successful and things like that, and there's all this uncertainty about AI and all this stuff, it's just a scary time to be a kid. We don't know what the world, I mean, in the last, 10, 20 years, there's been a bunch of like once in a lifetime events. Right? This happens. Oh, this happens once in a lifetime, except it's happening like every 3 years. So I think your kids there's a lot of like existential uncertainty about the future. Kids don't feel like they don't feel safe about what's coming next. And so I think sitting with them and talking about that. And here's the really like cool thing, right? So here's where like the cheat code comes in. You don't have to fix that as a parent. You can't fix it as a parent. Our goal is for them to not live it alone. We want them to be understood by you, right? So it's like you're going to hold their hand and we're going to face the apocalypse together. That does so much, right? Because the apocalypse isn't right here. So then it's like, okay, if you and I are facing the apocalypse together, can you do me a solid and at least put your laundry away? And like, y'all will be amazed, right? So like, if I come to you and I'm like, hey, can you do me a solid? But that's not the relationship we have with our kids, right? At some point they transition into being, we're friends with them instead of like necessarily being their parent. But so I think really talking to them about what the future looks like for them, the trajectory, I'd say this is kind of the biggest one. Most people who fall into really addiction with games, they are afraid of their future. And they're afraid that there is a future coming for them down the railroad tracks that they are unable to stop. I'm screwed and there's nothing I can do. That is probably, if you were to ask me what is the most intense and most frequent, that's like the one thing. So, right, it's just ask them like, what do you think about the world? What do you think about your future? What do you, because it's hard, it's so hard to describe, but they don't think, they have no certainty that if they do everything right for the next 4 years, they're going to get anything good. It's a huge problem right now. I don't know if that answers is like too much or what, but like,
No, that's great. And it kind of leads me in talking about futures and, we talked a lot about how parents can help kids when they're in their own homes, but there were a few questions that came in. I'm sure that our audience mostly has middle and high school kids, but they also have older children. And there are concerns about how do they help those kids once they're no longer under their roof and they go off to college. And if they, played and enjoyed video games at home, they're very worried how can they help their kids succeed in college, and be not afraid that they're going to be just playing video games all day.
yeah. So first thing is, I know this is going to sound hard, but another big mistake that I think parents make is they titrate to their fear. You want to not be afraid that your child will not have problems. And so if the goal is like for you to not be afraid, you're going to exert so much control that will probably backfire. So here's what I'm going to tell y'all. Your kids may struggle in college. Like it could happen, right? It could happen. And this is where I would say instead of like trying to get rid of that fear, I think even sharing that fear, because there's a good chance that your kids are also concerned. Like very few people I've met who are in high school, and I don't know if Linda mentioned the Bronx talk. So the other thing that I do is I go to schools and I talk to kids. Mm-hmm. And I'll go to a school and I'll ask them like, who here wants to spend more time on their cell phone? And like everyone raises their hand. And I ask them, who here wishes they spent less time on their cell phone? And they're kind of confused by that question. And then everyone raises their hand. Right. And so when I go there, I'm like, look, I'm here to equip you guys with knowledge. Y'all tell me, do you feel like you're in control? How many of y'all end up using a technological device more than you want to? Forget about your parents. So they are afraid too. And that's how you guys get together. So I think you can ask them, hey, like, I'm concerned about your technology usage once you leave the house. Are you concerned about it? Because here's the thing, if you tell them I'm worried about it and you have to fix it, they're going to deny it, right? Because they don't want to fix it in the way that you want to fix it. How do you feel about it? And then I would check in with them the first month. How's it going? Because there's a lot of isolation in the first month. Like people go to parties and just spend time scrolling on their cell phone, things like that. So I think the fear is going to be there. And the good news is that they share it. And if the two of y'all share a fear, start with that as your foundation and then start to have a conversation about, okay, what can we do about this?
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, we're actually starting run out of time. I'm going to give you one question and ask for a short answer if you're able to do that. So, because we have a couple little housekeeping things we need to do before we tell everyone goodbye. There was a question that just came in live about how to support a kid who has a strong interest in coding. And it relates to one of the questions we got in advance, which was, how do they foster a child's love for video games? And kids who possibly wanted to go into gaming as a career, as a video game creator, but still support healthy habits around gaming. So if there's,
Yeah. So I'll try to answer shortly. So this is what's pretty weird. When I was growing up and playing video games, I couldn't make the argument. Like, so my parents were like, you need to go to college and get a job. Like nowadays, like kids have this weird argument when they're 15 where they're like, this is going to be my job. So like, I know that mom, dad, you guys think I need grades, but this is what I want to do. So here's the first thing. If they want to succeed with coding or gaming, people don't realize how hard this is. So the esports athletes that I work with, and even people who are coding and stuff like that, right? Like they're incredibly disciplined on the whole. They work immense amounts. And I think if you want to support them in coding, like go for it. I think have an open-ended conversation. What do you like about coding? How can I support you? And then here's another cool conversation because we don't want to do the thinking for them. My whole thing is like, I'm lazy. I've always been lazy. And I want my kids to handle themselves. I don't want to be chasing them around so that I can play video games. So then you're going to ask them, okay, what do you like about coding? How can I support you? And what are the concerns that you have about coding? Does this coding impact gaming? Is it easy to get distracted when you're coding by like opening up a video game? Like, what's that like? And so I think asking those three questions is a really great place to start, but learning how to code is an amazing skill. And if you've got a kid who wants to do it, you're lucky.
Okay.
Thank
you. Yep.
Can I answer one more question?
Of course you may.
Okay, so this was just one that I saw. I'm looking at it too. So what are your recommendations if you try to set boundaries and have them take accountability, but they rebel or tantrum for it? I love this question.
Okay. Thank you for finding it.
What we want to do is let them rebel, let them have a tantrum, and hold the line. Find the smallest hill that you are willing to die on, because this is what I see happening a lot. Kid doesn't get an iPad, kid throws a tantrum. What you are training that kid to do is to throw a tantrum, right? So like they're learning, the reason kids throw tantrums is because they learn it works to get them what they want, or even subconsciously what they want. It's not like they're, conniving. Like this is the addiction talking. So I think that a tantrum is sometimes a sign that you're doing it right. You're holding the line. They're running up against a barrier that they're not used to. And then I think the second thing about that is that have a conversation afterward, right? Yesterday, you were really upset because I said this. How do you feel about that? What's going on? Help me understand how we can get to a place where you can do your homework and you can play video games. How can we get there? I don't like the tantrum. You don't like the tantrum. So it's a really common thing. I think it's a great question. I just wanted to chime in.
No, thank you so much. And we're going to have to end there, but I want to thank you so much. And Linda, please, we have one slide that we overlooked because we really would like to get the audience's feedback on tonight's talk. So go ahead, Linda, please share.
Yes, thank you. And thank you again to Dr. K for sharing all of your knowledge and your expertise. And thank you to everyone out there for taking the time to join us tonight. If you have a moment, here's our evaluation survey. It will also be included in follow-up emails that you will receive. It's very short, but provides us with valuable feedback to inform future webinars. So thank you in advance to everyone for taking a few minutes to complete it. And before we wrap up, we'd also like to invite you to join us for our next virtual
Linda,
speaker.
you just need to put up that slide. I'm sorry. That has the QR code so everybody can take the survey.
Isn't it? It's not up?
Nope.
Sorry.
That's okay. It really will be coming in our follow-up email, but if you have time to do it right now.
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we're currently finalizing our plans for our April webinar, and we'll be sharing the details and registration information as soon as it's available. Thank you for your continued support and for your ongoing interest in our webinars. We truly appreciate you being part of our community. Visit our website, notoprevent.org, and we look forward to our next event with you.
Yes, and thank you one more time, Dr. K, for joining us. It was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
We do have all the tips coming out in an email in just a couple of days. There'll be a link to this recording and also another QR code. Please do fill out the survey if you didn't get a chance now. Thank you so much.
And Linda, I'll just also throw in, because there was a question that came up in the Q&A as well, that information about Dr. K mentioned his book a couple of times that has a lot more information. That is going to be on the tip jar document in case you didn't see that reply in the Q&A. That's one of the things among many others, with reminders about a lot of the content from tonight and lots of resources directly from Dr. K and from Healthy Gamer. So there'll be tons of resources for you to access, including the book.
That's right.
On the tip jar. Be on the lookout. It'll come to your email.
So good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.